The IMF says Lebanon's banking secrecy law must be amended, and UAE-based Amanat Holdings is raising its foreign ownership cap to 100%. You're watching The Daily Brief with Forbes. I'm Ramia Faraj. The IMF says Lebanon's banking secrecy law has not resolved key deficiencies, and it's urging officials to make new changes to their first attempt at financial reform. It's the IMF's first comment on Lebanon's steps towards a checklist of reforms that would grant it access to $3 billion to ease its economic meltdown. The IMF says more government bodies should have access to banking data, including for administrative functions and not just as part of criminal investigations, as the current draft stipulates. UAE-based Amanat Holdings, a healthcare and education investment company, is set to raise the cap on foreign ownership of its shares from 49% to 100% effective September 6. Amanat's portfolio of investments span the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain. Amanat is the latest UAE company to receive government approval to raise the foreign ownership limit. The Kremlin today said Russia will stop selling oil to countries that impose price caps on its energy resources. It also said caps would lead to significant destabilization of the global energy market. The remarks came on the back of today's G7 finance ministers meeting to discuss a global price cap on Russian oil to cut its main source of cash and help force down its oil prices. Ryanair in August flew a record number of passengers for the fourth month in a row, keeping its position as Europe's largest airline by passenger numbers. It flew 16.9 million passengers in August, compared to a pre-COVID peak of 14.9 million in August 2019. Last week, it flew over 3,000 flights daily, almost double the 1,600 flights of its next largest rival, EasyJet. Unlike many airlines, the Irish budget carrier made a point of keeping its pilots and crew up to date with their flying hours during the pandemic. Meanwhile, Lufthansa was forced to cancel hundreds of flights today as its pilots went on strike. The airline says it canceled about 800 flights at its main bases in Frankfurt and Munich, affecting 130,000 passengers. Strikes and staff shortages have already forced several airlines to cancel thousands of flights this summer, leading to long queues at major airports. The U.S. Federal Reserve has ended a decade-long enforcement action against HSBC. In 2012, the Fed said the bank violated anti-money laundering rules and sanction laws. It was accused of allowing itself to be used to launder Mexican drug money. HSBC conceded it failed to maintain an anti-money laundering program and conducted transactions for customers in countries sanctioned by the U.S., including Iran. HSBC agreed to pay $1.92 billion in fines, the largest U.S. penalty against a bank at that time. Credit Suisse, which has been buffeted by a string of scandals, management changes, and global strategy rejigs, plans to launch a wealth business in China next year. The bank says it aims to start offering wealth management services in China next year on the back of securing full ownership of its local securities venture. Credit Suisse's China expansion plan comes even as the bank is cutting jobs and costs elsewhere in its efforts to recover from a string of losses and scandals. Millions were stuck at home in China's Chengdu city today after a handful of COVID-19 cases brought the mega city to a standstill. Supermarket shelves were stripped bare this week as locals feared a repeat of the months-long lockdown in Shanghai earlier this year. Chengdu is an economic hub in China's southwest that's home to 21 million people. And crew on the Arctic Sunrise, a Greenpeace ship, have dropped 18 boulders into the sea nearly 200 kilometers off of the Cornish coast. The action is part of a campaign calling on the government to ban bottom trawling in all UK marine protected areas. The boulders are meant to stop the dragging of heavily weighted nets across the seafloor. Greenpeace is committed to protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030. I'm Ramia Faraj. This is The Daily Brief. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.